It's 1600 GMT, that's 6 p.m. in Gaza. And Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered the military to submit to the war cabinet a plan for eliminating Hamas in the southern Gaza city of Rafah. He also wants a plan for evacuating the more than 1.3 million people sheltering there, but it's unclear where people trapped there could go. Earlier, the US president described Israel's war on Gaza as over the top. But Israel is clearly undeterred, moving ahead with its bombing campaign and expanding its offensive further into the south. Well, Hamda Salhout is live for us from Tel Aviv. So, first of all, Hamda, are Israeli officials giving any details about this plan to invade and to evacuate?
Well, we've got a statement from the Israeli Prime Minister's office about this expected operation inside of Rafah that says, quote, "It is impossible to achieve the war goal of eliminating Hamas and leaving 4 battalions in Rafah. It is clear that a massive operation inside of Rafah requires the evacuation of the civilian population from the combat zones. That is why the Prime Minister directed the Israeli defense establishment to bring to the cabinet a dual plan for both the evacuation of the population and for the disbanding of the battalions." Now, this comes after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke Wednesday night and vowed that the operation into Rafah would be imminent. And it comes after strikes on Thursday hit the southern Palestinian city, intense bombardment resulting in the deaths of multiple Palestinians. This is something the Israelis have been reiterating for months now, that they are going to operate into Rafah. So the information is not exactly new, but what is new is that he has asked both the army and the defense establishment to present this plan to the cabinet on how they are going to move forward with operating inside of Rafah on the ground. But the big question here is, where are these Palestinians supposed to go? They haven't been allowed back to the north. This is something that has been discussed. There's been pressure on Israel by the Americans to perhaps let the Palestinians go back to the north, but there is nothing to go back to. A majority of those buildings, those homes, have been destroyed. So the Israelis are saying that they're going to evacuate more than half of the population. You're talking about around 1.5 million Palestinians who've been forced to flee their homes multiple times and ending up in Rafah, which the Israeli army had designated as a safe zone. And it is also worth noting that this is not the first time the Israeli army is planning to attack an area that they have deemed a safe zone for Palestinians. So a lot of unanswered questions still on how the Israeli army is going to go about this plan and what sort of timeline, how long is this evacuation plan of theirs going to be?
And Hamda, we've heard criticism from the US president talking about Israel's war as over the top. What kind of reaction are we getting from Israeli officials to that?
There hasn't been any Israeli reaction to the president's remarks, but we've also heard from the State Department saying that an operation inside of Rafah would be disastrous. We've also heard from the national security spokesperson, John Kirby, who said that the Americans would not support this military operation where there are around 1.5 million Palestinians seeking refuge inside of Rafah. But again, the Israelis have said time and time again that they were going to enter Rafah. The Israeli army spokesperson had said months ago that wherever the Israeli army identifies a target, they are going to strike. And he singled out Rafah. He said that they were going to go there, not if, but just a matter of when. So the Israelis have also said that whatever it takes to accomplish these military objectives, these military goals, they're going to do. And it seems that the pressure that has been put on the United States until now, all of the words that the Americans have conveyed have fallen on deaf ears on the part of the Israelis. So the Israelis have delayed this operation. Reports in Israeli media are indicating that it will be smaller, perhaps more targeted and precise type of military moves. But it's difficult to conceptualize this when you have more than 1 million people who are in Rafah who have been forced to evacuate at the words of the Israeli military. So again, no reaction to the words from President Biden, but the military is now drawing up these plans for how they are apparently going to get the civilian population out of Rafah.
All right, Hamda Salhoud there. Let's go over to Tariq Abu Azzoum. He joins us from Rafah right now. And a lot of the talk, as you've been hearing, Tariq, is about Israeli plans for an invasion and an evacuation. Are you seeing any sign of that on the ground there?
Well, till now, Sami, we do not really touch or see any kind of practical developments regarding any possible ground incursion to Rafah district. But what we have been hearing from the Israeli military officials and political leaders, including the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, about a possible military act to be carried out on the ground here in Rafah, as they have ordered the Israeli army to prepare a dual plan for, number one, evacuating people from Rafah, and then to eliminate the remaining military brigades that belong to the military wing of Hamas. But that's what the Palestinians have been completely afraid of, as Palestinians have completely right now mistrusting what Israel has been always saying, because they find out that Israel is doing completely the opposite what they have been ordering people to do since the beginning of this conflict, as the real challenge right now for all Gazans about the next destination, especially that they have been barely able to struggle to, and were struggling to afford the basic necessities here, including the makeshift tents, where they will not be able to carry with them in their next destination they might be taken to, while the original residents of Rafah do not know either where to go, specifically that there might be the next target for the Israeli army. But till this very moment, there is no any further details about the plan or how Israel will force people to leave Rafah to start the military act on the ground. And at the same time, people think that Israel is using that as a kind of a pressure tool in order to force Hamas to accept all the Israeli demands that are related to the framework of the ceasefire talks that is right now continuing on Egypt, that are also supervised by Qatar. So people are afraid of that practical step, as the majority of Gaza's population right now have been cramped into that area, and they completely depend on the humanitarian supplies being delivered by the United Nations, which is, by the way, had threatened and warned about the possibility of suspending its operations in Gaza at the end of February if there is going to be no much fundraise going to be supported for the UNRWA to keep operating in Gaza. So Palestinians right now, Rafah, are facing completely chaotic options and choices, but they do not have any other thing to do, just simply because they have lost their houses, they are become fully drained, frustrated, and now they might be the next target, which means that there's going to be much scale loss of life and a high rate of casualties among civilians if that practically happened on the ground.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much, Tariq Abu Azzoum. Al Jazeera's senior political analyst Marwan Bishara joins us now live here in the studio. What do you make of this announcement that the Prime Minister of Israel asking the military to prepare a plan for an invasion and an evacuation? Is this an attempt to show the international community, particularly the US, that, hey, we are taking preparations before we actually invade Rafah?
Yes, and we are invading Rafah. Contrary to what you, the international community, or the Biden administration has been asking us not to do, we will do. We will invade and we will take over Rafah as we planned.
So is this another snub to the US?
This is an absolute snub to the US. This is just the latest of many snubs already. The most recent of which was snubbing Secretary Blinken, who did everything possible for the Netanyahu government, including bringing the Arabs once again to the table, including extracting concessions from the Arab partners, including extracting normalization, security guarantees, revitalizing the Palestinian Authority. And yet, Netanyahu would not stop. He is persistent. He wants to continue. This is, in as far as I can see, and the United States can see, the war is over. But Netanyahu insists on playing in the overtime, if you will, in order to think that, or in order to win, as he thinks. And how would he win? To my mind, this is a very, very dangerous phase now of the war. I mean, we've passed through many dangerous phases, of course, the death of tens of thousands, but this might actually lead to a mass slaughter of people in the southern part of Gaza and a possible potential expulsion of many, many Palestinians into the Sinai, plus, and this is very important to underline, analytically speaking, okay? I think Netanyahu wants to invade Rafah, and he wants to get to the point where he can make sure all the captives are dead. He wants the captives dead. I don't think he can afford the captives to be alive, because as long as the captives are alive, he is being held hostage by a part of the Israeli public, of the United States, by Hamas, so that he feels that his plans for Gaza, his plans for Palestine, are held captive by the captives. The best way to do it is to continue under the pretext of destroying Hamas, to basically destroy whatever is left of Hamas, but in the process, if the captives die, I think Netanyahu will be liberated from that burden that has been on him for the past 4 months. This will allow him a free hand to do whatever he wants to do in Gaza moving forward.
Let's come back to the point of him asking the military to prepare a plan for evacuation. Evacuation to where? Is it clear? I mean, there doesn't seem to be much infrastructure for yet another relocation of over 1 million Palestinians within Gaza, right?
Absolutely not.
Any indication from neighboring countries they want to take over 1 million Palestinians?
Look, if we've heard anything certain from the Egyptians over the past 4 months, is that while they look the other way, a slaughter and genocide is unraveling in plain sight in Gaza. The only thing they've been warning against is not the death, it's not the slaughter, it's not the war crimes. What they've been warning about is the ethnic cleansing and the expulsion of Palestinians into the Sinai, to the Egyptian territory. So Sisi, and as far as we know, the Egyptian, not the Mexican president, insists that there should be no expulsion of the Palestinians to Egypt. But that doesn't mean that Netanyahu is not pushing the Palestinians to such desperation that they will walk barefooted to the fence and try to break in to the Sinai looking for safety, because there is absolutely, at this point in time, nowhere safe in Gaza.
And on the point that you were analysing of the captives and what that means for Netanyahu's policy, what do you make of the line that we hear from Israeli officials that, no, they want to liberate the captives through military action? They don't want them dead.
Look, tactically speaking, right, for the past 4 months, they've been saying military objectives first, defeating Hamas, captives second, right? And then they bridge it by saying the best way to free the captives is by military victory. Now, over the past 4 months, this proved to be utterly wrong. They couldn't free a single captive through military operations. The only way they could have done it is through diplomatic process. Now, the more they got into Khan Yunis and other places, apparently, more than a few captives have already been killed by the Israeli strikes, right? Now, if they move to more and more strongholds in Khan Yunis,